When Elena Voss begged for help and the entire room laughed, no one realized the man they were mocking her in front of was Dante Moretti, and he was about to make every single one of them regret it. Before we start, tell me where you're listening from, and subscribe if you love intense emotional stories where justice always finds a way. The doors opened before she could change her mind. Elena Voss didn't belong in that room. Everything about her made that clear in the first 3 seconds. The dress she wore had once been beautiful, dark blue, fitted, simple, but now it was wrinkled, damp at the hem, clinging in the wrong places like it had been worn too long without rest. Her hair, usually neat, had come loose, strands sticking to her face. Her breathing was uneven, fast, like she had run all the way there, because she had. The ballroom was glowing. Crystal chandeliers pouring light over polished marble floors, champagne glasses catching reflections like tiny stars, laughter drifting through the air in soft, expensive waves. Conversations layered over one another in that careful, curated way rich people spoke when nothing in their lives had ever truly gone wrong. And then Elena walked in. At first, no one noticed. A few glances, a pause, a flicker of confusion. Then the silence began to spread. It moved like a ripple across water, subtle at first, then undeniable. One voice cut off mid-sentence. A waiter slowed. A woman near the bar leaned slightly toward her friend and whispered something behind manicured fingers. Elena didn't stop walking. Her eyes were scanning the room, not admiring it, not even really seeing it. She was searching, desperately, like someone looking for a lifeline in a place that had none. Her hands were shaking. She pushed past a group of guests, barely registering the way one of them stepped back with visible irritation. "Excuse me," she said, but the words were thin, distracted. Sorry. No one answered. At the center of the room, a large circular table dominated the space, the kind reserved for people who mattered, the kind surrounded by power disguised as elegance. That's where she went. That's where she stopped. There were 6 of them seated there, mid-conversation, mid-laughter, crystal glasses, tailored suits, jewelry that cost more than most people made in a year. And Elena Voss walked straight into the middle of it. "I need help." The words came out louder than she intended. Sharp, raw, impossible to ignore. Every head at the table turned toward her. For a moment, no one said anything. They just looked. Not with concern, not with curiosity, with confusion, followed quickly by something colder. Assessment. "Excuse me?" said Vanessa Cole, tilting her head slightly, her expression already tightening. "I think you're mistaken." "I'm not," Elena said quickly, too quickly. Her voice trembled, but she forced the words out anyway. I need someone to help me, please. I was told there are people here who can fix things. I don't have anywhere else to go." That did it. The confusion shifted, and then it cracked. A soft laugh came from the right side of the table. Then another. Quieter at first, like people testing whether it was acceptable. Then louder. "Oh my God," Vanessa said, leaning back in her chair, eyes scanning Elena from head to toe with open disbelief. "Is this serious?" "I'm serious," Elena said. Her fingers curled tightly at her sides. "I don't have money. I don't have anything, but I can work. I can—" "You don't have money?" Vanessa interrupted, raising a brow. "And you came here?" That earned a sharper laugh. One of the men at the table, Richard Halden, set his glass down slowly, watching Elena like she was a curiosity. "No invitation," he said. "No introduction. No decorum." "I didn't have time," Elena said. Her voice cracked this time. She couldn't stop it. "Someone is going to hurt me. I need help. That's all I'm asking." The room had gone quiet again, but it wasn't the same silence as before. This one was heavier, sharper, because now everyone was watching, and no one was stepping in. Vanessa let out a soft, incredulous laugh, shaking her head. "This is a charity gala, not a shelter." A few people nearby chuckled. "Please," Elena said again, quieter now, "I'm begging you." That word hung in the air. Begging. And something about it made the mood shift in a different direction entirely. Phones came out, not all at once, not obviously, but enough. A man near the edge of the table angled his camera slightly. A woman across the room whispered to her friend and glanced over with poorly hidden amusement. "Oh, this is unbelievable," Vanessa said, smiling now. "She's actually begging." More laughter. Not loud, not cruel in the way shouting is cruel. Worse, casual, like it didn't matter. Elena stood there, frozen in the center of it, the weight of every eye pressing into her skin. Her chest rose and fell too fast. Her throat felt tight, like the air itself had turned against her. "I just need one person," she said. "One." No one moved. Richard leaned forward slightly, resting his arms on the table. "And what exactly do you think we're going to do for you?" "Anything," she said. "I'll take anything." Another laugh, this one louder. And then someone in the back said, just loud enough to carry, "Wrong room." The words hit harder than anything else, because they were true. Elena felt it, in her bones, in the way the room looked at her like she didn't exist until she embarrassed them, in the way no one stood up, no one spoke, no one helped. She had come to the wrong place, and now there was no way out without breaking completely. So she stayed, just long enough to try one more time. "Please." But this time, the room didn't even bother pretending to listen. They were already laughing. The first laugh was quiet enough to be ignored. The second wasn't. By the third, the entire tone of the room had shifted. Elena Voss felt it happen in real time, the exact moment her desperation stopped being uncomfortable and became entertaining. It started at the table. Vanessa Cole leaned back in her chair, one hand lightly resting against her collarbone as she let out a soft, incredulous laugh that carried just far enough for others to hear. "I'm sorry," she said, though nothing about her expression suggested she was. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this." A few people nearby smiled, then more, and then the sound began to spread. Richard Halden didn't laugh immediately. He studied Elena first, his eyes slow, deliberate, taking in every detail, the worn fabric of her dress, the way her hands trembled, the desperation she was trying and failing to hold together. Then, the corner of his mouth lifted. "That's because people usually know better," he said. That earned a sharper reaction. Someone behind Elena snorted. Another voice chimed in, amused, careless. "Did she just walk in off the street?" "I think she did." "God, look at her." Elena's stomach tightened. She turned slightly, just enough to see the edges of the room, just enough to realize what was happening. People weren't just watching anymore. They were enjoying it. "I'm not here for—" she started, her voice unsteady. "Oh, we know exactly why you're here," Vanessa cut in smoothly. "You said it yourself. You need money, protection, help. It's very direct of you." More laughter, not explosive, not loud, but constant, like a low hum building into something harder to escape. Richard leaned forward slightly, resting his glass against the table as he spoke again. "You know what's fascinating?" he said. "You actually believed this would work." Elena swallowed. "I didn't have a choice." "That's what they all say," someone muttered from nearby. That one wasn't even directed at her. It didn't need to be. Vanessa tilted her head, studying Elena with open curiosity now, like she'd found something mildly interesting at the bottom of her shoe. "So, what exactly was the plan?" she asked. "Walk in, interrupt a private table, and what? Hope someone writes you a check?" A man at the edge of the group chuckled. "Honestly, I respect the confidence." "She doesn't look confident," another voice said. "She looks desperate," Richard finished. That word landed harder than the rest, because it was true. Elena felt it settle into her chest like weight. "I'm just asking for help," she said again, quieter now. "That's all." "And we're just saying no," Vanessa replied lightly. But she didn't stop there. She never intended to. "Actually," Vanessa added, glancing around the room, "this is kind of incredible. Does anyone else know her? Or did she just manifest?" Laughter again, this time louder. And now the phones were coming out. Not all at once, not obviously, but enough. A man near the bar angled his phone slightly, pretending to check a message while his camera pointed directly at Elena. Two women across the room leaned together, one of them whispering while the other tried, and failed, to hide her smile. Someone closer didn't bother hiding it at all. "Oh my God, this is going online," he said under his breath. Elena heard that. Her chest tightened. "No," she said quickly, looking around now, panic starting to rise. "Please don't film this." That only made it worse. "Why not?" Vanessa asked, raising a brow. "You came here for attention, didn't you?" "I came here for help." "Same thing, apparently." Richard let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "You picked the wrong audience." The room agreed. You could feel it, in the way people leaned in instead of stepping back, in the way the laughter no longer hesitated, in the way no one, not a single person, interrupted. Elena's vision blurred slightly, not from tears. Not yet. From the overwhelming pressure of being seen and dismissed at the same time. "I'll do anything," she said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. That was the moment it crossed a line. The laughter changed. It sharpened. Vanessa's smile widened, slow and deliberate. "Anything?" A few people reacted to that. Quick glances, raised brows, a shift in energy that was no longer just mocking, but circling something darker. Richard leaned back in his chair now, watching Elena like he was evaluating an offer he had no intention of accepting. "You really don't understand where you are," he said. "No," Elena whispered. "I understand exactly where I am." Her voice steadied just enough for that, just enough to cut through the noise for half a second. "I just thought maybe someone here would be different." Silence flickered, brief, fragile. Then someone laughed again, and it shattered. "Different?" Vanessa repeated, almost amused by the idea. "From what?" "From everyone else," Elena said. That earned the loudest reaction yet, because now it wasn't just about her. Now it was about them. And they didn't like what that implied. "Oh, she's judging us now," someone said. "Unbelievable." "You walk in here begging and somehow we're the problem?" Elena shook her head quickly. "That's not what I meant." "But it is," Richard said, his tone cooling. "And let me make something very clear." He leaned forward again. The room quieted just enough to listen. "You don't come into a room like this and expect kindness," he said. "You come in understanding exactly what you are and exactly what you're not." The words hit harder than anything before, because they weren't loud, they were certain, and the room agreed with him. You could feel that too. In the silence that followed, in the absence of anyone contradicting him, in the way Elena stood there, completely alone in a room full of people. The laughter didn't stop, it just changed shape, lower now, sharper, more controlled, like they were savoring it. And somewhere in the back of the room, someone stopped smiling, but Elena didn't see him, not yet. No one noticed him at first. That was the way he preferred it. The room was loud now, not with music, not with conversation, but with something thinner, sharper, laughter that lingered too long, voices that carried just enough cruelty to turn a moment into a spectacle. And in the far corner, away from the center table, away from the spotlight, Dante Moretti sat perfectly still. He hadn't touched his drink. The glass of whiskey in front of him caught the chandelier light, amber and untouched, as though it belonged to someone else. His hand rested loosely on the table beside it, fingers relaxed, posture calm. There was nothing outwardly threatening about him, nothing loud, nothing obvious. That was why most people didn't look twice. But the ones who didn't look long. Because there was something about him that didn't belong in a room like this, not because he wasn't wealthy enough or powerful enough, but because he didn't need the room to prove anything. The room needed him. And somewhere, deep beneath the laughter and the noise, a few people felt that. They just didn't understand it. Not yet. Dante's gaze hadn't moved since Elena Voss walked in. From the moment she crossed the threshold, something in the rhythm of the night had shifted. Subtle, almost invisible. But he felt it the way a storm is felt before it breaks. He watched her walk, not the way the others did, measuring, judging, dismissing. He watched the details, the uneven breath, the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands trembled, not from weakness but from holding something together that was already breaking. He saw the moment she chose that table. He saw the moment she realized she'd made a mistake. And he saw the moment the room decided she was entertainment. The laughter didn't interest him. He'd heard worse. He'd been in rooms where men laughed while deciding who lived and who didn't, where cruelty wasn't casual, it was currency. This was smaller, petty, but there was something about it that sat wrong, something about the way it spread. Too easy, too comfortable, as if everyone in the room had been waiting for a moment like this, waiting for someone weaker to walk in so they could remind themselves they weren't. Dante leaned back slightly in his chair, still silent, still watching. Vanessa Cole's voice cut through the noise again, smooth and amused, layering mockery with elegance. Richard Halden followed, his tone colder, more deliberate. And Elena. Elena kept speaking, kept trying. Even as the room turned against her, that was what held Dante's attention. Not her desperation, not her situation, her persistence. Most people broke faster than that. Most people adjusted, retreated, apologized for taking up space they weren't allowed to occupy. She didn't. Not completely. Even now, even here, even surrounded by people who had already decided what she was worth. She was still asking, still standing, still refusing to disappear. That was rare. Dante's fingers shifted slightly against the table, the smallest movement, barely noticeable. But across the room, one of the men near the bar saw it and immediately looked away. Because he knew, not who Dante was exactly, but what he was. The kind of man who didn't move without reason, the kind of man who didn't speak unless something had already been decided. The laughter swelled again. Elena's voice dropped lower, thinner, but still there. "I'll do anything." That line echoed, changed the air. Dante's jaw tightened, not visibly, but enough. He'd heard that before, too many times and in too many places, always said the same way, always meaning something worse than the words themselves. Vanessa reacted. Richard reacted. The room reacted. But Dante didn't move, not yet, because he was waiting for something specific. And then it came, small, almost lost in the noise. Elena took a step back. Just one. Her voice broke, but she forced it out anyway. "I was told someone here could help me." Another laugh, another wave of dismissal. But she kept going. "I didn't know where else to go," she said. "I was told to ask for—" She hesitated, just for a second. Like saying the name might make it real. Like saying it might be a mistake. And then she said it anyway. "Moretti." It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Because the effect was immediate, absolute. The laughter didn't fade. It stopped. Like someone had cut the sound out of the room entirely. A glass clinked somewhere in the distance. No one spoke. Vanessa blinked. Richard's expression shifted, barely, but enough. Because now the name existed in the room. And names like that didn't belong in conversations like this. Not casually, not accidentally. In the back of the room, Dante Moretti stood up. Slowly, deliberately. The chair didn't scrape. The movement didn't draw attention by force, but it didn't need to. Because something had already changed. People felt it before they saw it. A pressure, a shift in the air. The kind that makes instincts react before logic catches up. One by one, heads turned. Not toward Elena anymore, toward him, the man no one had noticed. Until now. Dante adjusted his cuff once. A small, precise motion. Then he started walking. Each step measured, unhurried, but final. No one laughed, no one whispered, no one lifted their phone, because suddenly they understood. This wasn't entertainment anymore, and whatever happened next was not going to be funny. The name shouldn't have mattered. In a room like this, names were currency, thrown around casually, used to impress, to elevate, to signal importance. People dropped them into conversations the way others dropped coins into jars. But this one was different. Elena hadn't said it like a name meant to impress. She said it like a last option, like the final door in a hallway where every other door had already been slammed shut. "Moretti." It slipped out of her quietly, almost uncertain, like she wasn't even sure she should be saying it at all. But the moment it existed in the air, everything changed. The laughter didn't fade. It stopped, not gradually, not awkwardly, completely, like the entire room had inhaled at the same time and forgotten how to breathe. Vanessa Cole's smile froze first, not disappeared, froze, locked in place as her brain caught up to what she'd just heard. "Excuse me?" she said, but her voice had lost something, not volume, not control, certainty. Richard Halden didn't speak. He didn't move. but his posture shifted just slightly. A tightening through his shoulders, a stillness that hadn't been there before. Because unlike the others, he recognized the name, and more importantly, he understood what it meant. Around them, the room reacted in smaller ways. A chair scraped too loudly against marble. Someone near the bar set their glass down with a sharp, unintentional clink. A phone lowered. Another followed. The quiet wasn't empty anymore. It was full of something cold. Elena felt it, even if she didn't understand it. She swallowed, her heart still racing, her chest tight, her body caught somewhere between fear and fragile hope. I was told, she said, her voice smaller now, careful, that someone here might know him, that he could help. No one laughed, no one corrected her, no one told her she was wrong, and that was the first sign something had shifted in a way she hadn't expected. Vanessa let out a soft, brittle laugh, trying to recover the tone she'd had just seconds ago. "That's very ambitious," she said, but the words didn't land the same way, because now she was speaking to the room, not controlling it. Richard finally leaned forward again, but slower this time, more deliberate. "And who exactly told you that?" he asked. The question sounded calm, but there was an edge underneath it now, a need to understand, a need to assess damage. Elena shook her head slightly. "I don't know his name. It was just someone. They said if I ever needed real help, I should find someone connected to..." She stopped, because she didn't need to say it again. Everyone had already heard it, and across the room, a chair moved, not loudly, not dramatically, but in the silence, it sounded like a crack in glass. Every head turned. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was instinct, because something about that sound felt final. In the back of the room, a man stood up, slowly, no rush, no urgency. But there was something about the way he moved that made the air shift again. People stepped aside without realizing they were doing it. A path opened, not because he demanded it, because no one wanted to be in his way. Elena didn't see him at first. She was still looking at Vanessa, at Richard, at the table that had laughed at her minutes ago and now couldn't quite meet her eyes. But she felt it, that same shift, that same pressure, like the room had tilted slightly and everything inside it was adjusting. Then she turned, and she saw him. Dante Moretti didn't look like what she expected. There was no obvious display of power, no raised voice, no guards at his side, just a man in a dark suit moving toward her with calm, measured steps. But the reaction around him, that told her everything she needed to know. People didn't just notice him. They recalculated around him. Conversations died mid-thought. Eyes dropped, shoulders straightened. Vanessa's expression shifted again, faster this time. Recognition, followed immediately by something else. Concern. "Mr. Moretti," she said quickly, rising halfway from her chair. Her voice had changed, respect layered over something thinner. Careful, too careful. Richard stood as well, though not as quickly. "Dante," he said, forcing a small smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. But Dante didn't look at either of them. Not yet. His attention went exactly where it had been since the moment Elena walked in. To her. He stopped a few feet away, close enough that she could see the details now, the sharp line of his jaw, the stillness in his posture, the kind of control that didn't need to announce itself. Up close, it was worse. Or better, depending on which side of him you were on. The room held its breath. No one moved, no one spoke, because whatever happened next was going to matter. Dante looked at Elena, not dismissively, not curiously, directly, like she was the only person in the room that existed, and for the first time since she walked in, she didn't feel invisible. "You said my name," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. It carried anyway, through the silence, through the tension, through the realization that had settled over the entire room like something heavy and irreversible. Elena's throat tightened. Yes, one word, barely steady, but enough. Dante's gaze didn't shift, didn't soften, didn't harden. It simply stayed. And behind them, no one laughed, because now they understood. This wasn't a mistake anymore. This wasn't entertainment. This was something else entirely. And whatever came next, They had already lost control of it. The silence didn't break. It stretched, thick, heavy, pressing against every person in the room like something alive. Dante Moretti stood in front of Elena Voss, close enough now that she could feel the steadiness of him. Not warmth, not comfort. Control, the kind of control that made everything else feel unstable by comparison. Behind her, she could feel the room watching, not laughing anymore, not whispering, waiting. For him. Vanessa didn't sit back down. Neither did Richard. No one dared, because this moment didn't belong to them anymore. Dante took one final step forward. Then he stopped. Not close enough to invade her space. Not distant enough to be detached. Exact, measured, intentional. His eyes stayed on hers, and there was something in that gaze that made her chest tighten. Not fear, not exactly, but the overwhelming awareness that she was being seen completely. Not assessed, not judged, seen. "You said my name," he repeated quietly. Elena nodded. Her throat felt dry, tight. I didn't know if—" He lifted a hand slightly, not to silence her, to slow the moment down. And somehow it worked. The room stilled further. Even the air seemed to settle. Then he asked the question. Simple, direct, unavoidable. "Who hurt you?" The words didn't echo. They landed. And everything changed. Because that wasn't the question the room had been asking. The room had asked what she wanted, what she could offer, what she was worth. Dante asked who hurt her. And suddenly, that was the only thing that mattered. Elena felt it hit her all at once. The past hour, the past days, the past weeks, all of it pressing forward, demanding to be spoken. Her first instinct was to shake her head, to deflect, to say it didn't matter, because that was easier, safer. But she looked at him, and something in his expression, calm, steady, unyielding, told her that wasn't an option, not anymore. Her voice came out small at first. I didn't mean to come here like this." Dante didn't move, didn't interrupt. "Answer the question," he said, not harshly, but firmly enough that it cut through everything else. Elena swallowed. Her hands trembled slightly at her sides. "It started 3 weeks ago," she said. "I worked for a company, finance, consulting, small firm, but we handled private accounts." A flicker of recognition passed across a few faces in the room. Dante noticed. Elena didn't. "I found something I wasn't supposed to see," she continued. "Transactions, accounts that didn't match, money moving through shell companies that didn't exist on paper." Now the room was very still. Richard's jaw tightened, just slightly. "I thought it was a mistake," Elena said. "So I brought it to my supervisor." Her voice wavered. And that's when everything changed. Dante's gaze sharpened. "Name." She hesitated, because saying it meant something. It meant there was no going back. But then she looked past Dante, at the table, at the people who had laughed at her, and something inside her hardened. Richard Halden. The name dropped like a stone. A few people inhaled sharply. Vanessa went completely still. And Richard smiled. Not a real smile, a controlled one, polished, dismissive. "This is absurd," he said smoothly. "I don't even—" Dante didn't look at him, not yet. "Continue," Dante said. Elena nodded, her breathing uneven now. "He told me to ignore it," she said. "Said it was above my clearance, but the next day my access was revoked, my email wiped, my files gone." Her voice started to shake more. "I was fired that afternoon. No explanation." Dante's jaw tightened slightly. "And then?" Elena hesitated again. This part was harder. 2 nights later," she said, quieter now, "someone broke into my apartment. That landed differently, sharper, more immediate. They didn't take anything," she said. "They just moved things, left my door open, like they wanted me to know they'd been there." A ripple of unease moved through the room. Even the ones who didn't understand the details understood that. "They called me the next day," she said. "Private number. Told me to stop asking questions. Told me I'd already lost my job, and I should be grateful that was all I lost." Her voice broke slightly. "And then they said, if I didn't disappear next time it wouldn't be my apartment they visited." Silence. Real silence now. Not tension, not anticipation. Something colder. Because this wasn't a scene anymore. It was a situation. Elena looked at Dante again. "I didn't know where else to go," she whispered. "Someone told me, if I ever got in trouble like this, I should find someone connected to you, that you handle things like this." Dante didn't respond immediately, but something in him had shifted, subtle, dangerous. Behind them, Richard finally let out a short laugh. "This is insane," he said. "You're going to stand here and take the word of, what, a disgruntled employee?" Now Dante looked at him, just once, and that was enough, because whatever Richard saw in that look made the rest of his sentence disappear. Dante turned back to Elena. "Everything you just said," he asked quietly, "you can prove it?" Elena nodded. "Yes." A pause. Then Dante asked one final question, and this one didn't sound simple anymore. "Did anyone else in this room know?" Elena's eyes moved slowly, across the table, across the faces, and then she stopped. On Vanessa, only for a second, but it was enough. The room shifted again, and this time, no one misunderstood it, because now it wasn't just about what happened, it was about who was involved, and suddenly, the wrong room had become the worst possible place to be. The moment Elena's gaze landed on Vanessa, just for a second, just long enough to be undeniable, the balance in the room broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. Dante Moretti didn't react the way most men would. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't move quickly, he simply turned. And that was enough. Because now his attention wasn't on Elena anymore, it was on them. Vanessa Cole felt it first. That shift, that invisible pressure that made her straighten without realizing she'd done it. Her fingers tightened slightly against the edge of the table, her polished composure holding, but barely. "Dante," she said, her voice smooth, measured, just a little too careful. "I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding." He didn't answer. Not yet. His eyes moved from her to Richard Halden. And that was when Richard understood something had gone very wrong. The confidence he'd been wearing like armor began to crack, not visibly, not to anyone who didn't know what to look for, but it was there. In the way he adjusted his stance, in the way his smile didn't quite return, in the way he didn't speak immediately. Because suddenly, this wasn't a conversation he controlled. Dante took one slow step toward the table. No rush, no wasted movement, but the effect was immediate. Around the room, people started shifting, subtly. A step back, a glance toward the exits, a quiet recalculation, and then the exits were no longer available. No one saw them enter. That was the unsettling part. One moment, the doors were just doors. The next, they weren't. Men stood there now, still, silent, unmistakable. Not security in the traditional sense, not the kind hired for events. These men didn't wear uniforms. They didn't need to. They wore something else entirely, authority, the kind that didn't ask. Phones lowered, almost instinctively, one by one, because recording something like this suddenly felt like a very bad idea. And the laughter that had filled the room minutes ago didn't just disappear. It felt impossible, like it had never belonged there in the first place. Vanessa noticed the doors. Her eyes flickered toward them just for a second, then back to Dante. "Is this really necessary?" she asked, attempting a small, dismissive laugh that didn't land anywhere. "We're talking about a misunderstanding with an employee." "She said your name," Dante replied. Quiet, flat, final. Vanessa's smile faltered. "Indirectly," she said quickly, "and I think we both know how unreliable." "Stop!" The word wasn't loud, but it cut through her sentence like it had never existed. Vanessa's mouth closed, not because she chose to, because she had to. Dante's attention shifted back to Richard, and this time, he didn't wait. "You employed her," Dante said. It wasn't a question. Richard exhaled slowly, forcing control back into his posture. "Yes," he said, briefly. "And she brought you information." Richard hesitated. A mistake. Small, but fatal in a moment like this. "She made claims," he corrected. "Unverified, inappropriate. We handled it internally." Dante took another step closer. Close enough now that the table no longer felt like a barrier. Internally, he repeated. Richard nodded, holding his ground. Yes. Silence, heavy, unforgiving. Then Dante spoke again. And this time, there was something underneath the calm, something colder. You fired her. Yes. You removed her access. Yes. You had someone enter her apartment. Richard's composure slipped, just for a second. That's ridiculous, he said, but the words came out thinner now. Dante didn't look away, didn't blink. Careful. One word. And suddenly, the entire room understood the difference between power and performance. Richard swallowed. For the first time since Elena walked in, he looked uncertain. Vanessa stepped in quickly, her voice sharper now, trying to regain control. This is getting out of hand, she said. You're taking the word of someone who barged in here with no proof, no standing. Dante turned to her, and that was worse, because whatever she had been about to say disappeared completely. You knew, he said, not asked, stated. Vanessa's breath caught. No, she said quickly. I mean, I've heard things, but that doesn't mean... Elena. Dante didn't raise his voice, but he didn't need to. Elena stepped forward slightly, her pulse racing, her body still catching up to everything that was happening. Yes? He didn't take his eyes off Vanessa. Did she know? Elena looked at Vanessa again. Really looked this time. At the way her posture had changed, at the way her confidence had narrowed into something tighter, more defensive. Yes, Elena said. The word was quiet, but it echoed. Vanessa's expression hardened. That's a lie. But no one believed it, not anymore. Because the room had already shifted, fully, irreversibly. What had been a stage for mockery was now something else entirely. A place where every word mattered, every reaction was noted, every mistake carried weight. Dante straightened slightly, not stepping back, just resetting. And when he spoke again, the final traces of the old atmosphere disappeared completely. No one leaves, he said. The words settled over the room like something permanent. Not a threat, not a suggestion, a reality. And just like that, the power shifted. Not gradually, not subtly, completely. Vanessa didn't sit. Richard didn't speak. No one laughed, no one moved. Because now they understood something they hadn't before. They hadn't been watching a desperate woman make a mistake. They had been watching themselves make one, and it was already too late to fix it. No one spoke. Not because they didn't want to, because they didn't know how. The room had changed too quickly. What had started as amusement, light, careless, disposable, had hardened into something far heavier. The kind of silence that forces people to confront what they have already done. Elena Voss stood in the center of it, not shaking as much anymore, not because she wasn't afraid, but because something inside her had shifted. She wasn't asking for help anymore. Now, she was telling the truth. Dante Moretti stepped back half a pace, not retreating, creating space for her. Tell it, he said quietly. That was all. No pressure, no performance, just permission. And Elena took a breath that felt like it came from somewhere deeper than her lungs. I wasn't just fired, she said, and her voice carried, clearer now, stronger. I was erased. A murmur rippled faintly through the edges of the room, but it died instantly when Dante didn't react. Elena continued. The files I found weren't mistakes, she said. They were deliberate, money routed through empty companies, transfers broken into pieces so no one system would flag it. Her eyes flicked to Richard Halden. He didn't look away, but he didn't look comfortable anymore either. You told me to ignore it, she said directly to him. You told me I didn't understand what I was looking at. Richard's jaw tightened. I told you it was confidential, he replied. There's a difference. No, Elena said, there isn't. That landed harder than anything before, because she didn't hesitate, didn't soften it, didn't apologize. She turned slightly, addressing the room now, not just him. I copied the files, she said. I thought if I had proof, someone would listen. A few people shifted, uneasy. I went to internal review, she continued. They told me they'd look into it. She gave a short, humorless breath. They did. Her eyes returned to Richard. and the next morning my access was gone. Silence, heavy. "And that afternoon," she said, "so was my job." Vanessa crossed her arms, her composure tightening again. "That still doesn't explain—" Elena cut her off. "They took everything." That stopped her, because now there was something else in Elena's voice. Not fear, not even anger, something sharper. "They locked my accounts," she said. "Every single one. My savings, my checking, everything frozen under investigation." A ripple moved through the room. People exchanged quick glances. That was different. That wasn't just dismissal, that was control. "I went home that night," Elena said, "and my door was open." No one laughed. No one whispered. "They didn't steal anything," she said. "They didn't need to. They moved things, opened drawers, left my bedroom light on." Her hands tightened slightly at her sides, just enough to let me know they'd been there. Richard shifted again. This time, people noticed. "And the next day," she said, "I got a call." Her voice lowered slightly, but somehow it carried even more. "They told me I'd made a mistake, that I should have taken the warning." A pause. "They told me I didn't have anything left to protect anymore." The words settled into the room like something cold and permanent. "And then they said," Elena continued, her voice tightening just slightly, "if I kept pushing, next time wouldn't be a warning." Silence, complete, total. And now, the room wasn't just watching, it was understanding, slowly, uncomfortably. Dante didn't move, didn't speak, but his presence had changed again. Quieter, darker, more focused. Elena turned toward Vanessa. "And you knew," she said. Vanessa straightened immediately. "That's not true." "You were at the meeting," Elena said, "the one where they decided to handle it internally." Vanessa shook her head quickly. "I sit in on dozens of meetings." "You laughed." That stopped her, not because it was loud, because it was precise. "You laughed when they said I was unstable," Elena said, "that I misunderstood financial structures, that I was looking for attention." A flicker of recognition crossed a few faces in the room. People who had heard that version, who had accepted it. Vanessa's lips pressed together. "That was a professional assessment," she said, "based on the information we had." "No," Elena replied. "It was convenient." That word hung there, unavoidable. "You needed me to be wrong," Elena continued, "because if I wasn't, then everything you were involved in—" "Careful!" Vanessa snapped. Too fast, too sharp. And that was the moment it broke. Because now, it wasn't just Elena speaking. It was Vanessa reacting, and everyone saw it. The shift, the crack, the truth trying to push through. The room turned on itself, not physically, not yet, but mentally. People looked at Richard differently now. At Vanessa, at each other, replaying what they'd heard, what they'd ignored, what they'd laughed at, and realizing they hadn't just witnessed something, they'd participated, they'd chosen a side, and it had been the wrong one. A man near the back lowered his gaze completely. A woman near the bar took a slow step away from the table. Distance, instinctive, necessary, because suddenly, this wasn't a stranger begging for help. This was a woman telling the truth, and the people they trusted were in it. Richard exhaled slowly, forcing his composure back into place. "This is a narrative," he said. "That's all it is. A disgruntled former employee trying to rewrite events." "No." The word didn't come from Elena. It came from Dante, quiet, controlled, final. And just like that, Richard stopped talking. Because now, the truth wasn't just exposed, it was acknowledged. And the room understood something all at once. They hadn't laughed at a desperate woman. They hadn't mocked a stranger. They had stood in a room and defended a man capable of destroying someone's life without consequence, a man who had already tried and failed. Only because she hadn't disappeared, only because she had walked into the wrong room, at exactly the right time. No one gave an order out loud, but everything started moving anyway. That was the difference between power that needed to announce itself and power that didn't. Dante Moretti didn't raise his voice. He didn't look at the doors. He didn't signal to anyone directly. He just shifted his gaze, once, and the room obeyed. It happened fast. So fast, most people didn't even understand it until it was already over. Two of the men near the exit stepped forward at the exact same time. Silent, precise. One moved to the left door, the other to the right, closing the distance without urgency, but with finality. Another appeared behind Richard Halden. No one saw where he came from. 1 second, Richard was standing alone. The next, he wasn't. "Sit down," Richard said sharply, trying to reclaim something, control, authority, anything. But his voice didn't carry anymore, because it didn't matter. The man behind him didn't touch him. Not yet. He didn't need to. Dante took one step closer. "Bring him." That was it. 2 words, quiet, unemotional, and suddenly, hands were on Richard, firm, unavoidable. "What is this?" Richard snapped, pulling back instinctively. "You can't just... Do you know who I am?" No one answered him, because now, no one cared. He struggled once, just once, enough to make it clear he still believed he had options. Then, the second man stepped in, and the struggle stopped. Not violently, efficiently, controlled. Richard's arms were pinned, his posture forced into something smaller, tighter, contained. "This is illegal," he said, louder now, looking around the room. "Someone call..." No one moved. Not a single person reached for their phone, because now those phones felt like liabilities. Vanessa Cole stepped forward, her composure snapping back into place, but thinner this time, more fragile. "This is completely unacceptable," she said sharply. "You're not just going to drag him out of here like some kind of criminal." Dante turned his head, just slightly, and Vanessa stopped talking. Again, because whatever she had been about to say didn't matter anymore. "You knew," Dante said, not raised, not emphasized, but it landed harder than anything she'd said. Vanessa inhaled, forcing herself to stand her ground. "I heard allegations," she said carefully. "That's very different from being involved." Dante watched her, not blinking, not reacting, just watching. And that was worse, because now she had to fill the silence. "I have connections," she added too quickly. "You don't want to make this into something it doesn't need to be." That was her mistake, mentioning power, claiming it, in front of him. Dante reached into his jacket slowly. No one moved, no one breathed. He pulled out his phone, not dramatically, not for effect. He looked down once, typed something, then lifted his gaze back to her. It took less than 10 seconds. Vanessa's phone buzzed, loud, sharp in the silence. She froze, didn't want to look, but couldn't not. She pulled it out slowly. Her screen lit up, and her face changed, not gradually, instantly, color draining, eyes tightening. "What?" she whispered, barely audible. Another buzz, then another, and another. Emails and notifications, calls, all at once. Her hands started to shake. "What did you do?" she said, looking up at Dante now, the confidence completely gone. He didn't answer. Because he didn't need to, she already knew. Her voice cracked slightly as she read. "Board access? Revoked?" she said. "That's not possible." Another notification. "Accounts under review." Her breathing picked up. "No." Another. "Pending investigation." The room watched, helpless, fascinated, terrified, because this wasn't an argument anymore. This was dismantling, in real time. Vanessa looked up again, panic bleeding through the edges now. "You can't do this," she said. "You don't have the authority." Dante finally spoke. "You're mistaken." Quiet. Final. "I don't need authority." That landed, harder than anything else. Behind her, Richard struggled again. "Vanessa, do something," he snapped, desperation creeping in now. "Call someone. Call..." "Take him out," Dante said. And just like that, it was over. Richard didn't get another word out. He was turned, moved, dragged, not roughly, not chaotically, but with the kind of control that made resistance pointless. His shoes scraped once against the marble, too loud, too human. And then he was gone. The doors opened, closed. Silence, the kind that leaves a mark. Vanessa stood there, frozen, her phone still in her hand, notifications still coming, everything she had built unraveling faster than she could process it. Around the room, people stepped back. Not from Dante, from her. Because now, Association was dangerous. The alliances that had once defined the room were dissolving in seconds. No one wanted to be next. No one wanted to be seen. Dante slipped his phone back into his jacket, like nothing had happened. Like everything had. Then he looked at Elena, and in that moment, the entire room understood something with perfect clarity. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't anger. This was consequence, and they had just watched it unfold from the wrong side of it. The doors closed behind Richard Halden with a quiet, final sound. Not loud, not dramatic, but permanent. For a few seconds, no one in the room moved. No one spoke, because what had just happened didn't feel real yet. It felt like something that should be undone, rewound, explained away. But it wasn't. And slowly, very slowly, the weight of it began to settle. Vanessa Cole stepped back first, just one step. But it said everything. Her phone was still in her hand, still lighting up with notifications she no longer wanted to read. Her face had lost its composure completely now, replaced by something raw, something closer to fear. She didn't speak again. She didn't try, because she understood. It was over. Not just the moment. Everything. Around the room, people began to shift, not toward Dante, away from him. Subtle movements, careful distances. The same people who had leaned in before, laughing, watching, participating, were now recalculating every step they took, every word they had said. Because now they knew exactly where they stood, and more importantly, where they didn't. At the center of it all, Elena Voss stood still. Her pulse was still racing, her chest still tight. But the panic, the sharp, suffocating panic that had driven her into the room in the first place, was gone. Replaced by something unfamiliar, something quieter, safer. She didn't move, didn't speak, because she didn't know what came next. For the past 3 weeks, everything in her life had been reaction. Running, hiding, surviving moment to moment, and now, everything had stopped. Dante Moretti turned back to her. The shift was immediate, not in posture, not in expression, but in presence. The pressure that had filled the room, that had forced everyone else into silence, softened. Not completely, but enough. "You're not staying here tonight," he said. It wasn't a question. Elena blinked, the words taking a second to register. No," she said quietly. "I don't have anywhere to—" "I know." He didn't let her finish, because he already understood. That was the difference. She exhaled slowly, her shoulders lowering for the first time since she walked in. "What happens now?" she asked. Her voice wasn't shaking anymore, just uncertain. Dante held her gaze. "Now," he said, "you're safe." The word felt unfamiliar, almost unreal. Safe. Elena swallowed. "Yep. I don't think I remember what that feels like," she admitted. Something in Dante's expression shifted. Subtle, almost invisible, but it was there. "You will," he said, simple, certain. Behind them, the room remained frozen, people still watching, still trying to understand how everything had unraveled so quickly. But for the first time since she entered, Elena didn't care, because none of them mattered anymore. Dante stepped slightly to the side, creating a clear path toward the exit. "Come with me," he said. No hesitation, no explanation, just trust. Elena looked at him for a moment, really looked this time, at the man who had walked into her worst moment and ended it, at the man who had said almost nothing and changed everything. "You're not asking," she said softly. "No. And if I say no, you won't. Not arrogant, not threatening, just true." Elena let out a small breath, and for the first time in a long time, she made a decision without fear driving it. "Okay," she said. Dante nodded once. That was all. As they moved, the room parted again, more quickly this time, more carefully. No one wanted to be in their way. No one wanted to be noticed. No one wanted to be remembered. Elena felt their eyes on her as she walked, the same eyes that had laughed at her minutes ago. But now, they looked different. No amusement and no superiority, just unease and something else. Regret. She didn't look back, didn't give them the chance to see anything in her face. because whatever had happened in that room was already behind her. The doors opened. The hallway beyond was quieter, dimmer, real. Two men fell into step behind them, not close enough to crowd, but near enough to make one thing clear. She wasn't alone anymore. Outside, the night air hit her like a reset. Cool, sharp, clean. She inhaled deeply, her lungs filling fully for the first time in days. Dante's car waited at the curb. Dark, unassuming, but solid in a way everything else in her life had stopped being. The driver stepped out immediately, opening the back door without a word. Elena hesitated for half a second. Not from doubt, from the realization that this moment was the dividing line, everything before, everything after. She looked at Dante once more. "What does this mean?" she asked. Not about the car, not about the ride, and about everything. Dante met her gaze. "It means," he said, "no one touches you again without answering to me." The words weren't dramatic, they weren't loud, but they settled into something deeper than fear, something stronger, protection, real, unquestionable. Elena nodded slowly. Then she got in the car. The door closed softly behind her. Dante followed. And as the car pulled away from the curb, the chaos of the night faded into distance. The laughter, the humiliation, the fear, all of it shrinking in the rearview mirror. Her life hadn't just changed. It had shifted entirely, and for the first time in weeks, maybe longer. Elena Voss allowed herself to believe something she hadn't dared to before. She might actually be okay. The city looked different from above, not quieter, not calmer, just distant. Elena Voss stood near the floor-to-ceiling window, her reflection faint against the glass, the lights of the city stretching endlessly below her like something untouchable. Cars moved like slow lines of fire. Buildings rose in perfect silence. Everything looked controlled, ordered, nothing like the chaos she had walked out of. She hadn't spoken much since they arrived. Not in the car, not when the doors opened, not when she stepped into a space that felt less like an apartment and more like something built to keep the outside world exactly where it belonged, out. The floors were polished, the lighting soft, everything placed with precision, like nothing here happened by accident. It should have made her feel small. Instead, it made her feel aware of where she was, of who she was with, of what had just happened. Behind her, she heard the faint sound of a door closing. Measured, quiet. She didn't turn right away. She kept her eyes on the city. "You didn't ask me anything in the car," she said. Her voice was steady now, different from before. Dante Moretti didn't answer immediately. She could feel him in the room without looking, the same controlled presence, the same stillness that seemed to shift the space around it. "I didn't need to," he said. That made her turn. Finally. He stood a few feet away, jacket still on, posture unchanged, calm, grounded, like the night hadn't disrupted him at all. But she knew better now. Not because of what he showed, because of what he didn't. Elena crossed her arms loosely, not defensive, just holding herself in place. "That's not how this works," she said. Dante tilted his head slightly. "No, no," she repeated. "You don't get to step in, take control of everything, and then decide you already know what I need." There was no fear in her voice now, no hesitation, and that caught his attention, not because it challenged him, because it didn't try to avoid him. "I know you needed help," he said. "That's not the same thing." She took a step closer, not into his space, but closer to the truth. "You asked me one question in that room," she said. "Who hurt you?" A pause. "And then you handled it." "Yes? That's not the whole story." Dante watched her, carefully, because now, this wasn't about control. This was about something else. Elena exhaled slowly. "I didn't come there just to be saved," she said. "I came because I didn't have another option. And yeah, I needed help. But I'm not." She hesitated, searching for the right word. "I'm not something you fix and move on from." "You think that's what this is?" he asked. "I don't know what this is," she said honestly. "That's the problem." The silence that followed wasn't heavy like before. It was different, open, uncertain, Real? Elena looked around the room briefly, then back at him. Everything that just happened, she said. It doesn't feel real yet. 1 minute I'm being laughed at in a room full of people, and the next, she gestured slightly. This. Dante didn't interrupt, didn't try to explain it away, because there wasn't a simple explanation. There's a cost to this, she said. That made him focus more closely. What do you think it is, he asked. She met his gaze directly. You. The word landed cleanly. No accusation, no fear, just clarity. You don't do things halfway, she continued. I saw that. Everyone in that room saw it. You don't step in unless you're going to take control of everything. That's how I operate. I know. Another step closer. Now there was no distance left between conversation and confrontation. And if I stay here, she said, if I accept your help, that means I'm stepping into your world, your rules, your way of doing things. Dante didn't deny it. That's one way to look at it. It's the honest way to look at it. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The city moved behind her. The room stayed still. I don't want to disappear into that, she said finally. I've spent 3 weeks fighting not to disappear at all. Something shifted in Dante's expression, subtle, but real. You won't, he said. How do you know? Because you're still standing here arguing with me. That almost made her smile. Almost. But she didn't let it. Good, she said, because I'm not going to be handled. The word was intentional, sharp, a line drawn. Dante nodded once. I wouldn't expect you to be. And I'm not going to be grateful in the way people expect either, she added. I am grateful, but I'm not going to pretend that means I don't get a say in what happens next. You do, he said. That answer came without hesitation, and that mattered. Elena studied him for a moment, really studied him. The man who had walked into her worst moment and turned it into something else entirely. Not softer, not easier, but different. You're dangerous, she said quietly. Correct. And you're used to people doing what you say. Yes? And you're not used to being questioned. He paused, just slightly. Not often. She nodded. Then we're going to have to adjust that. There it was, not fear, not submission, something else entirely. Dante held her gaze, and for the first time that night, something close to interest appeared beneath the control. Maybe we will, he said. Elena exhaled slowly, not tense anymore, not running, just present. What happens now? She asked. This time, the question meant something different. Not survival, not escape, possibility. Dante didn't answer immediately, because for the first time, there wasn't a predetermined move, no script, no outcome already decided. Now, he said, we figure out what you want. She nodded, slowly. That was new. That was unfamiliar. That was hers. And as the city lights flickered beyond the glass and the distance between them shifted into something neither of them had expected. The beginning didn't feel safe. It didn't feel simple. It didn't feel easy. It felt dangerous, in the way something real always does. And neither of them looked away.